this document on interracial marriage and religion, wow, you've really gotten into some deep stuff here, wrestling with some seriously complex ideas.
It's a very layered topic for sure.
Yeah, it seems like right off the bat, the document dives into the Old Testament, pulling from Deuteronomy, Leviticus, even going as far back as Joshua and Nehemiah.
Yeah, you're right. And what's interesting is how it uses these passages to kind of build this idea of separation, and not just about like spiritual purity, but it brings in lineage, even land ownership, as reasons for the Israelites to stay separate.
Right, right.
It's almost like maintaining a distinct cultural and ethnic identity. It's like it was seen as essential back then.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that because one of the things I found, I don't know, fascinating maybe, is that the document argues, right, the separation is not necessary after Christ, which on the surface, I'm like, okay, that makes sense.
Right.
But then it takes this almost like contradictory turn.
Yeah, it's like it's trying to sort of reconcile that Old Testament stance with this newer perspective, but it doesn't completely abandon it either. And you actually see this tension like throughout history, right?
Yeah.
Trying to figure out how do we interpret these ancient religious texts within the context of like evolving social norms. It's like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You can force it, but it's never really going to be a clean fit.
It's a tough balance to strike.
Yeah.
And then it gets into this whole concept of like racial and ethnic differences, like running much deeper, even suggesting that those differences impact how people like understand God.
Yeah.
Even using the phrase preserve the genetic integrity of the Hebrews, claiming it was necessary for the eventual birth of Christ.
Yeah, and that's where things get really complex, I think, because that idea of like these inherent differences between different groups, especially tied to something as fundamental as, understanding God, it's historically been used to justify prejudice and discrimination, and that's a dangerous, dangerous road to go down because it reduces individuals to just these predetermined categories based on their ethnicity and ignores their individual experiences and their individual beliefs. You're totally right. And it really begs the question of where do you draw the line between respecting someone's religious beliefs and then also challenging interpretations that could be really harmful?
That's the $1 million question, right? And unfortunately, there's not a simple answer. It's a very fine line, this balance between respecting individual faith, but also advocating for inclusivity and understanding. And this document with its kind of internal contradictions really highlights that tension. On the one hand, it acknowledges the harm caused by racial prejudice, even introducing this whole concept of an ethnomartyr, someone who was killed for their ethnicity.
Right.
But then it makes a case against interracial marriage, which, at least on the surface, seems to contradict this idea of protecting individuals from ethnic prejudice. Yeah, it's almost like it sees the problem, but then still holds on to the very thing that might be contributing to it.
Exactly. And to further its point, it even brings up the tragic case of Elliot Rodger. It really is like the document is acknowledging how complex the world is, but then at the same time, it's holding on to these traditional beliefs, even when they kind of clash,
Right, right.
And that actually brings us to like another interesting point. The document argues that marrying outside your race is imprudent, even if it's not considered a sin anymore.
Right. So it's almost like they're saying, okay, well, it's not, forbidden, but it's not a good idea either.
Yeah, like don't do it.
Right. And it even goes as far as to suggest that couples in interracial relationships are like more likely to face conflict, divorce. There's even a part where it asks, why would you want to? Which, I don't know, that felt a little, I don't know.
A little pointed.
Yeah, a little pointed, like a little judgy.
Yeah, it does come across as questioning the motives of people who choose to be in these interracial relationships. Like almost implying that they're looking for something like novel or acting on this like racial fetish instead of, genuine love and connection.
Right.
And that's just so reductive because it disregards the countless interracial couples who have these incredibly deep and meaningful relationships. Like the document saying love can't possibly be the real driving force behind these relationships. And that's just not true.
You're hitting on such an important point because, while the document does present these arguments against interracial marriage, it does say, right, that there are exceptions. And it's not trying to shame anybody who is in one of these relationships. It even concedes that true love can like overcome all these difficulties.
Right. It's this weird contradiction, right? It's like, I wouldn't personally choose this path, but I recognize that a successful and loving interracial marriage is possible,
Yeah, that's right. It's interesting.
It's a testament to like the power of human connection, I think. That even when you have, societal pressures, different cultural backgrounds,
Sure.
love can win.
It reminds me of that famous quote by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., right? Where he says, I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Powerful words.
Really, really powerful words.
And I think they serve as this really important reminder that judging individuals solely based on their race or ethnicity is just, it's never fair. It's never accurate. We have to look beyond just those superficial differences and recognize the inherent worth of every single person.
Yeah. It's so easy to get caught up in the intellectual debate of it all, the arguments and the interpretations, the historical context.
Right. But we have to remember there are real people behind all of this
Yeah.
with their own experiences, their own perspectives.
And that's what I think makes this document more than just, some kind of intellectual or theological exercise for you. It's reflecting, your personal beliefs and your search for answers in all of this.
Yeah. And as we've seen, the answers aren't always black and white,
Yeah. This deep dive, we've gone through so much intricate theological arguments, interpretations of the historical context, even social commentary.
Right.
It's a lot to unpack.
Yeah, and I think it really just highlights how interconnected all of these things are, right? Faith, culture, identity.
Mm-hmm.
We've gone from these ancient texts to, modern day issues, and it's clear that it's never straightforward, these conversations.
Not at all. If there's one thing we can take away from this whole deep dive, I think it's that approaching these kinds of topics, you really need nuance, a willingness to actually consider different points of view, like you said before, layers.
Yeah, and empathy, right? A willingness to actually listen and really try to understand where someone else is coming from.
Yeah.
It's not about being right or wrong. It's about, trying to get a deeper understanding.
100%. And it's easy to forget that sometimes when we get caught up in the back and forth.
Yeah.
But it's at the heart of this, there are real people grappling with these really complex questions.
Yeah.
And, thank you, for being willing to share that journey with us and to really dig into this document and, lay it all out there.
Thanks for having me. It's been a really interesting conversation.
Yeah, it has. And for everyone listening, you continue to kind of explore these really complex issues. Remember to be kind to each other, be open-minded, and never stop, searching for those answers, even when they're hard to find. And on that note, this has been another Deep Dive. We'll catch you next time.